Okay, so the top 20 albums of March was a little bit of a strain of a list to put together. I think that there was quite a lot to choose from, a lot of great quality in terms of extreme metal and heavier music. But I found myself wanting to lean into the stuff that was most important to me, that was more per my own taste, rather than sort of kowtowing to the, what was most popular sort of angle that a lot of people take. So, uh, with that in mind, I think that Astriferous's Pulsations from the Black Orb ended up being the album of the month. I think it's the one I listen to the most for sure. I keep track of that. It was the one that just sort of reminded me that there's a certain standard that's important to me in death metal, that it focuses on the riffs, and everything else comes secondary to that, in terms of creating an imaginative experience that has a unique atmosphere and uh, stylized render and tone to all of the instruments. It all neatly flowed and worked together so well that I found myself just kind of obsessed with the record. Um, it isn't that I had any sort of emotional attachment to it, or it's more that, like, this is just exactly what I enjoy about death metal, and a fantastic example of it. And that's kind of usually the bottom line, is that I just appreciate the amount of craft that goes into a record like this, and it is a record that I will remember for the rest of the year and beyond. So I have a lot of similar praise for Majesties, a Minneapolis, Minnesota-based melodic death metal band from some pretty well-known musicians. And Vast Reaches Unclaimed is uh, definitely a throwback as much as it is its own thing. And I liked that the balance there, in that it really was playing to a crowd while also doing exactly what it wanted to with the melodic death metal genre, which you can tell they have some fairly strong passion for. And it is kind of a unique, kind of personal taste that they've elevated and pushed back out onto the public here. So, really finely produced, very distinct, and I think it's probably the most emotionally affecting and fealty building sort of release of the month. It really is the one that will stick with me for a lot of different reasons. I think that the only reason it didn't make it into number one is because there have to be 20, and they can't all be number one. It really is kind of that simple this time around. This is one of my most listened to records this month as well. There wasn't a huge difference between number one and number two in that respect. They're both very high quality death metal records of different style, and yeah, this is just a fantastic album that I think very quickly makes friends with whoever listens to it. You know. So, New York, Rochester, New York-based progressive death metal band Contrarian never really lacked for anything in their early recordings. I think that a lot of different lineup changes and all that definitely affected the way their style uh, evolved over time, and it feels like it took them a while to fully uh, find a place where they're comfortable and start to produce what is really their own voice, and less of a tribute, like a pure tribute to classic late 80s, early 90s death metal, as it began to include progressive metal ideas or progressive rock ideas. So, Sage of Shekinah is just a fantastic record. It's the performances and the production values and every technical aspect of this record is perfect, and I think that they've now found their songwriting voice, and it's quite sentimental, philosophical. There's a lot of there's a couple of new hands involved in this one, but in general, the compositions are sort of where it becomes the most stirring. And if you're a fan of progressive death metal, I don't see how you could turn a record like this down. It's definitely one of my favorites of the month, and a record that I continue to listen to on a regular basis, because I do think that it's sort of, so far it's one of their peaks, and I think probably my favorite record of theirs up to this point. Hyperdancio's Deranged is a basically just a 4-song EP, and it just happens to be great. It's a pure death metal band out of Denmark, and this is a more thrashing, slightly more brutal, very straightforward style that is maniac, and it's just the way that it attacks every bit of song here, and the guitar performances are just incredible overall. And I've always praised this band because I've always appreciated their sound, but I feel like this is like some of their best material. I don't know if this was a separate session or if these were leftovers from their previous album, but these are great songs. I think that the production sound is perfect. It feels a little bit more self-produced, a little bit more organic. And if I'm comparing something to early Suffocation, like, you've pretty much got me. And if you throw in like a little bit of Death Thrash into the attack, perfect. So I hope that they continue down this road in the future, because I thought this is just one of the best death metal releases of the month for sure. On Tenebrous Wings is the second full length from Norwegian thrash metal band Chakma, and this is just a great thrash metal record. It's a riff record. It's about half an hour long. It's got influences from mostly kind of the Slayer side of things, with a bit of I guess some German thrash, as well as the kind of traits you'd expect from like Necromantian, where it is sort of a relentless, aggressive attack that I would equate with like the first Sacrifice record, the Canadian band, and kind of go from there. So definitely check that out. Reaching Beyond Asaya is the third full length from Brazilian melodic black metal band Outlaw, and this is the one where I think they'd found their stride in their second album, and this third album is the one that just kind of explodes with ideas. And I feel like the charisma of the band is really arriving in a really big way on this record, on the third one, and I thought this was a great record. I still continue to listen to it beyond the review. It's a little bit modern. It's a little bit atmospheric. It is a little bit catchy, but it's also a melodic black metal record proper, that I think will at least somewhat appeal to the fans of the old school early 90s kind of style a little bit. But more so anyone who's sort of followed the thread beyond that point. And there's a bit of that tradition in this record. And I think there's just a lot of, style and inspiration in what they're doing with this record. Now you might see a theme developing here in some regards. Sepulchrum's Lamentation of Immolated Souls is just another great death metal record. It's one that revels in its death metalness. It's got that early Morbid Angel attack to it, the sort of a death thrash aggression throughout. It's a pretty finely performed record from these Chilean folks, and it just has a lot of riffs. I mean, what else do you need, right? Very well produced, a little bit modern, very much still in the spirit of old school death metal. Fine album art. Everything kind of comes together for this one. I don't know if it's going to be shockingly great to a lot of people who have heard it all, but I do think that it should be at least be inspiring for just how much they put into it and just attack the record in general. Ovuth is an Icelandic black death metal band who lean a little bit more towards readable melodic death metal on this album. This is their debut full length of Existential Distortion, is a moody sort of crossover, the way I see it, between melodic death metal and a little bit of the sort of early progressive tides of Enslaved almost. So we get a really interesting record in terms of atmosphere and riff style, but most songs eventually come back around to a hook of some kind, and the best songs on here definitely do. So those really counted for me. It had me coming back and listening to it quite a bit. It'll be interesting to see how it holds up, but for now the hype is still pretty strong for this one after having reviewed it about 3 weeks ago. So. Saturnian Bloodstorm I think it is the third full length from Lamp of Murmur, and it is a very different record. It is very much in the style of classic, let's say late 90s, early 2000s Immortal, in the sense that it, in a very specific way, attacks the sort of thrash and sort of epic heavy metal feeling of those records like at the Heart of Winter, and gives it his own melodic touch, his own feeling to it, while also keeping it aggressive thrashing and a little bit mechanical, thanks to some programmed drums you might not even notice. So it wasn't a perfect record for me, but it was still one of the most memorable black metal records of the month, and I can appreciate every aspect of this record, from, the compositions themselves, the inspiration that came from the curation of the art. I think it's all just very well done, and with good sense for something that feels old school and but not, fully there. So, great record. The second full length from Portland, Oregon based black metal duo Spirit Possession of the Sign is an extension of maybe the signature that had developed on the first record, maybe a little bit of a cleanup of the render and the sound of the first record, but generally it continues the conversation. It holds your attention. You could easily play both those records back to back and sort of see how this is chapter 2, and I really liked that about this record. And that's about as simple as it is. The finesse of Steve Peacock's guitar playing is the major draw here for me. I love all the extra effects and the reverberation of the whole thing. And there's a feral intelligence to all of it that feels exciting in a cool way. So if you liked the idea of this band leaning a little bit more into their speed and heavy metal side more often, I think that's generally what they bring here on this second record. Goat Explosion is a German doom metal band. You could call them a stoner doom metal band if you wanted to, and Threatening Skies is their second full length. Now this record follows up a very strong debut with even better performances. It does feel like they've honed every bit of their craft and have given us some of their best songs, and it really helps that they've gone for, more epic song lengths, longer pieces that are more involved and expressive. So this was kind of a surprise release. I just kind of picked it up randomly, and turned out that it was one of the best things of the month. It really is going to be pretty solid, whether you like Probably more so if you like traditional doom metal and you don't mind just a little bit of a stoner metal swing to some of the songs. So worth checking out.
From coast to coast, hypocrisy. And from their thunder towers, hear them scream.
So talking about Entropia is a little bit confusing at first, I think, in every case, because the elevator pitch is that they're a post-black metal band who began as more of a shoegazing type thing and eventually became more of an avant-garde psychedelic band who focused a little bit more on not only the modern post-metal feeling, but also their own brand of just sort of unique exaggerations of the form that have been developed over several albums. Total is supposed to be that. It's supposed to be a summation of their experiences and a transformation of the band into something new. So I thought this was a great record. I find it completely underrated so far. I think more people should be listening to it, and don't worry so much about the post-black metal tag. It's just that nothing else fits, and psychedelic black metal probably won't say a lot to most people, so check it out. Bastard Grave is a Swedish death metal band, and Vortex of Disgust is their third full-length album. And I think this one is, it really is riding on the back of the last one in a lot of ways, because they'd really hit it out of the park with their second record. It was pretty solid. It was a little bit more of a crust punk influenced kind of jam, and then this record sits on the muck a little bit longer. It gets a bit dirtier and heavier, and at the expense of a little bit of speed, at the expense of a little bit of technicality, they find a lot more memorable groove, and this helps to emphasize their songwriting a little bit more, and they don't really lack in the spectacle and energy that they put forth. So just a solid band. I continue to be impressed by what they do, and I can't wait to see what they do after this. Nemesis So Poor is a German atmospheric black metal band, and with a bit of melodic and progressive influence in their songwriting. And Firmament, their latest record, it sort of perfects the total transformation of the band beyond a few records, sort of a long drawn out history that now sort of comes to a head on this record and finds its own personal style, which is a very heady, thoughtful record that is always, it feels like it's always fully pensive, fully deep in thought, and thinking about something. So that makes a lot of sense with the themes of the record, which are fairly deep, and just an overall a really strong release from a independent band. Prophecies Ablaze is a long-awaited latest album from Unpure, a now Uppsala and basically a Swedish black metal band who have always kind of been at the gates between the idea that formed in the first wave, the zeitgeist that formed in the second wave, and kind of keeping it pure black metal as they see it, which is still a very potent and aggressive form of black metal, informed by speed metal and black metal, thrash metal influences. And so what we get is a very aggressive return for this band. They now have the lineup now consists of members who you'll know from Dejal and some other bands, Watain particularly, and you can tell that there's just a lot of really strong talent behind this record. It is very well played. But it is also, I hate to say it, it's kind of an old school black metal record in a lot of ways, in a very sort of thrashing mad kind of way, with some more anthemic pieces on here too, and it's just like a perfect return for the band that has never been really appreciated as much as they perhaps should be. So. Resin is a Chicago, Illinois-based psychedelic doom metal band, and Solace is sort of a finer point found in between a lot of the experimentation that they've undergone over the last couple of records, where they found a way to combine the more jammed feeling of the band with the psychedelic or stoner doom metal side of things, and they've created their own sound with it. I think it is both approachable in terms of being a psychedelic doom metal fan in the kind of the Electric Wizard kind of spirit, but also their own take on it, which has a lot of pretty strong influences from different types of music and different types of doom. Now, of course, we could just say that it sounds a bit like Windhand, and that's great, and that'd be good enough too. The Malign Covenant is the debut full-length from Verminous Serpent, and this is a band that features the vocalist from Primordial, I believe the guitarist from Malthusian who's playing drums here, I think, and I think the guitarist from Slither. So what we get here is sort of a primal form of black metal that most people will refer to as black doom metal, which is slow to mid-paced most of the time and kicks up a sort of it feels definitely like an album born in a rehearsal room. It definitely feels like these songs are jammed. It feels like they really put a lot of time into developing these riffs, developing the sound design that would aid those riffs down its own corridor, and then it just kind of goes from there. It's really the type of record where you have to listen to it all the way through, and it's sort of designed that way. It is a thread, and it's beautiful when you follow it. Yararoth's The Man in the Wood is basically a completely refurbished early demo recording that has been sort of juiced up into a full-length debut, and it means that they've made a lot of very distinct choices in bringing this up to the sort of somewhere between progressive rock, folk rock, traditional doom metal, and epic doom metal. So there's a lot that goes into this record that feels like a very fresh thought, but also a very old ancient thing. And beyond that, I think that even just mentioning a band like High Tide makes a lot of sense, but you also have to go to Candlemass too, and I really like those two notes together in terms of this record and its folkish narrative. And I'm surprised they haven't iterated on this thought beyond that point, but I'm glad they finally realized this album proper and included, I think, a new song or a newly finished song. So really interesting record. It's definitely an acquired taste. The drums are it's just a very interesting choice there in terms of their Catacomb is a French death metal band that formed way back in 1990, and they were pretty short-lived, and they tried to come back a few times over the years. Only certain members were interested in going forward at various times, and they finally returned back in 2019, and When the Stars Are Right is their sort of finished thought that first began back in, I mean, they probably had this record in mind since 1993 at least. So what you're getting here is approximately a modern Nocturnus album, as one might see it. It is very much influenced by what I would consider Covenant era Morbid Angel in terms of the riff style and the dual rhythms on the guitar, but also the keyboards bring us into more of a Nocturnus realm. as do the vocals and some of the general cadence of the music with some of the unique rhythmic notions that it carries with it. Great old school death metal record to a point, but also something a little bit different in terms of death metal with keyboards in an old school sense. So pretty great record. Definitely took maybe a listen or two to acclimate to if you're expecting anything near Into the Maze of Kadath. This is something different. So give it a spin. All right, and finally, at the Altar of the Horned God, have put out a second album, Heart of Silence, and this is just kind of a spiritual channel for the artist, who I really appreciate from his work in Mistagos, as well as other groups, and this takes on, for lack of a better description, there's sort of a tribal feeling to these beats. There's a martial industrial feeling to them. There's a sort of a dark wave or an experimental node that he pulls from for this music that escapes plain black metal affix and really does grow a pair of wings here in terms of moving on from the sort of plain atmospheric black metal pieces of the first record, and now creates a much more sophisticated but still basically primally placed experience. Anyway, it's a mood. I hate to, I don't really want to say that and have that be the review, but it's definitely a mood, and it's a record that's very memorable for my taste. So see if that's what you're all about.